So thank you everyone for coming. Quick introduction. So this talk is called New Model or Tech Hype Cycle. It's how NFTs impact the art world. So the topic of today is essentially, are NFTs going to make an impact on the art world, or is this just a bubble that's going to burst? And we're going to discuss this with myself. So my name is Alex Chetvertinsky. I'm the co-founder of Parallel. And we're really excited to be doing this partnership with Art Brussels and iMAL to bring these kinds of topics that are on everybody's minds about NFTs and their future. And I'm really honored to be joined by Valérie Asson-Benilouche from Galerie Charlot, who is showing now at Art Brussels with some NFTs. Thomas de Ben, who is a digital art liaison with Plus One Gallery, also showing NFTs at Art Brussels. Frédéric de Freut, who is a collector, and Casey Reese, who is joining us from Los Angeles. Thanks, Casey, for being with us at this early hour in LA. Before I give you the mic, Casey, I just want to quickly ask everybody on the panel to say 2 words about who you are and why you're here, and then Casey, you'll do the same and take it away with your presentation.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Valérie Asson-Benilouche, and I opened the Galerie Charlotte about 12 years ago in Paris and 5 years ago in Tel Aviv in Israel. And I'm focused in digital art since then, so it's a long time. It's been a long time I'm presenting generative art, interactive art, link to new media. So all my artists are working with new technology, and NFT is one of the part and the continuity of digital art. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Hello, I'm Thomas from Plus One Gallery in Antwerp. A year ago, I started working for the gallery to explore the possibilities about everything regarding digital and Web3.
Hello, my name is Frédéric de Freut. I'm collecting since last year NFTs on mainly on Tezos platform and mainly generative art. So 70 to 80% is generative art and 20% is more traditional or figurative art. And I'm in I have a job as an ICT manager.
Casey, go ahead.
Just go from here, Alex? Is that the idea?
That's the idea.
Wonderful. Hi, everybody. I really wish I was with you today rather than this awkward projection kind of behind you and in front of you at a different scale. I was doing a little bit of digging over the last couple of days, and I realized that the last time I was in Brussels was 2003, about 19 years ago. It was in April. And at that time, I was there at the invitation of iMAL, and I was teaching a coding workshop for the local community. It was a 3-day workshop in coding. And so now, almost 20 years later, I'm here sitting in my COVID recovery, bed in Los Angeles while you're all there together. And a lot's happened in those 20 years since I, first visited iMAL. And I wanted to kind of frame things that I'm talking about today in that way. So before getting into NFTs, I just want to set the foundation to what I see as a larger ecosystem of the arts world. I also want to clarify that I'm very much not an art market expert or an economist. I've been teaching since 2003 at UCLA and our MFA program in media arts there. I also have a lot of experience now working in the nonprofits part of the art world. I started processing with Ben Fry about 20 years ago, which is a coding environment to learn how to code within the context of the visual arts. And 10 years ago, we started a nonprofit, the Processing Foundation. So we've been building that nonprofit over the last 10 years to really support media art and emerging art made with code, which has come to a lot of energy in the last year and a half through NFTs. I've also, I think, been really lucky over the years to work with a lot of institutions. For example, showing my work in the Pompidou and the Victoria and Albert Museum, This is an exhibition from a number of years ago at the Whitney Museum of American Art. And also I've been really lucky to participate in a lot of festivals, both public and private. This is at the Day for Night Festival in Houston a number of years ago that Alex curated. And in addition to that, I've also been working with galleries now for 20 years, both with the DAM Gallery, now DAM Projects in Berlin. I've been working with Wolf there for 17 years, and over 20 years now with Stephen Sachs at the Bitforms Gallery in New York. And I think also it's relevant to the conversation today that over the last year, I've created, I counted yesterday, over 6,000 NFTs in the last year, and I've collected hundreds as well. So that's like a short personal intro to where I'm coming from, how I've kind of arrived at this moment with you today. And through that experience, this is, I would say, a very subjective, personal view of how I see NFTs fitting into the larger picture. So for me, this is what's needed for a healthy art environment. I think for the larger space to really work well for artists, I think that we need a blend of all of these. A blend of nonprofit, artist-run spaces, independent public art schools, institutional nonprofit granting organizations. So for example, in the United States, some examples of that would be the Warhol Foundation or the Knight Foundation. Government-funded grants and opportunities. In the US, that would be the NEA, different things operate in Europe that I know less about. And then also, this is the thing that's been missing completely, really, not completely, but pragmatically and functioning well within digital arts for a number of years. And that's what I consider to be a sustainable market for artists and collectors. So I think that when one of these elements holds too much power or it doesn't exist, it creates a bad environment for the artist because it removes opportunities. I think you can look at the history of art over hundreds of years and see examples of that when one of these really gains a tremendous amount of power over the others. So my largest, I would say, point of view on this is that artists need to be able to make their own choices rather than to have other people make choices for them or for them not to have choices available. So for example, I think an artist should be able to decide if they want to engage with a gallery or not, rather than just to be no opportunities for artists working with digital technology to work with galleries. I think artists should be able to make a decision if they choose to apply for a grant or not. Artists should be able to make a decision if they want to try and sell their work or not. I think some artists will choose not to, some artists will choose to do that. What I'm really asking for and hoping for is for that to be an option for some artists. So also to clarify, most of my experience is in an area of the art world that sometimes is called media art or digital art. And all of my specific focus is on software. I don't see software as being something new. I don't see it as being disconnected from the histories of art that come before. I mean, people now have been working with software, artists have been working with software for many decades, about 6 decades. And I see it as being a connection through time rather than something separate. I think it's far more interesting to think about the way all of these visual media technologies relate to each other than to isolate one and treat it as being different. And I think that's what's happened. Because the traditional art world was not open to software, digital arts, electronics on a large scale, there's been a separate community develop. And I think there's a lot of good things about that. And I think there's a lot of interesting possibilities of it beginning to merge a little bit more. So until what I think of as being very recently, artists working with digital media had very few opportunities for people to collect their work. I mean, there are possibilities, but I think it's a very small market. There's a few collectors that are vying for attention of the galleries. It doesn't work at scale the way it does for other areas within the arts. I think one interesting counterexample to this, or an interesting provocation, was at iMAL in 2018. And that was the Holy Fire exhibition that Yves Bernard and Domenica Quaranta curated. I think the idea of that was that there is not a distinction between media arts and market, that the two can really connect. That was a really, I think, interesting and well curated idea. So there's also this other thing that I do believe in, that most digital art doesn't belong in the gallery in the first place. I think it really lives most comfortably online. It lives most comfortably on screens in a distributed way. And so I think of all the artists working with digital media and media art, it makes sense for some of them to work within a gallery context to install their work. But for many people, that combination doesn't operate. So I believe also it's important to mention that artists working with software and electronics have had a lot of opportunities. And I think most specifically in Europe, due to the way that funding works there in a way that's different from some other parts in the world. So festivals, grants, and I think it's vibrant. It's been really vibrant for a long time. And I feel really confident in saying that I wouldn't have had the career that I've had to date if it weren't for funding opportunities in Europe, bringing people like me over for exhibitions, for festivals. And that's been really viable. It's been really wonderful. And it's made a lot of really good work happen and given a lot of artist opportunities. But I also think that not everyone has had those opportunities. And I think we need more options for artists to work in different ways. So this bridges us to NFTs. And when we talk about NFTs, or when I talk about NFTs, I want to clarify that I'm not talking about cartoon collectibles. I'm not talking about sports memorabilia. I love cartoons, I love sports, but I don't want to confuse that with my ideas of what art is. So I think there's a lot of precedent for what's happened in the last few years with NFTs. And I think it goes back a long time. For example, the dematerialization of the art object, there's decades of precedent for that. Digital mass media, I think pragmatically, that goes back to the 1980s with things like hypercard distribution and early ways of distributing software on home computers. A wide access to a very open internet, which I think goes, from the 90s, when a lot of people sort of my generation began to make and distribute digital work. The idea that we have really capable computers with screens that are network connected, I think has been essential for NFTs. And then also the idea of a blockchain record in place of a certificate of authenticity. And a blockchain record that is public and open and accessible has been essential for what's happened in the last few years with NFTs. So this is what I'm excited about with NFTs, things that I think have a lot of potential. One is that the art is online, and then it's available for anybody to access or to view or to download at all times. This is sort of this background in being web-based. That the NFTs provide collectors with confidence, that they're recognized as the owner. I think there's both social consensus around this, so that people are willing to collect works that are public and freely available. And also there's the blockchain record as well as sort of that artifact, not artifact, but that data storage. I think the fact that artists automatically or semi-automatically receive a percentage of secondary sales is really important. That's something that's been fought for decades. Artist unions, artist groups. It just hasn't worked in practice, even though there's been contracts for it. And then I think also when we talk about NFTs, we don't really need to think of what people call JPEGs or other forms that are pure digital media. If you think of an NFT really as a certificate of authenticity, an NFT can really be just about anything, any kind of art, traditional or not. So one thing that's happened in the last year and a half is that I co-founded an online gallery. It's completely online called FeralFile. And at FeralFile, we publish artist editions, we publish one-of-ones of both recognized artists, people who have been pioneers, and also emerging digital artists as well. And the decisions that we made around FeralFile all come back to this set of rights that we've clarified that are both sort of written to be understood and also as legal documents as well. And so I just want to go through those rights, but for both the artist and the collectors. So the first artist right is that the artist owns the copyright and the image rights to the work. That means the collector can't copy, reproduce, or make derivatives of the work, but the artist still can. Next, I talked about this a moment ago, that artists earn a percentage of secondary sales. Next, that when the artwork is shown, the artist will always be credited. Anytime the work's displayed or shared, it must be properly attributed. That the work is protected, that collectors can't modify, distort, or misrepresent the work when they display it. That the artist will know when the work changes hands. That information, that provenance will be available through the public blockchain record. And that also the artist makes the choice to grant the collectors a certain set of rights. And I think it's important that autonomy is with the artists. I don't really think of the collector owning the work. They really don't. What they have is a set of rights that the artist has granted them. And then lastly, that this is something forever, in perpetuity, that the artist will retain these rights. So these are rights that artists have wanted for decades. There's the foundational 1971 document, the Artist Reserved Rights and Transfer Agreement, that outlines a lot of these things. With FairFile, we've updated it for the present. So on the flip side of this, or I would say complementary to this, are the collector rights. The collector should be able to download the work. They should have access to a permanent link where they can download the original files, full resolution, rather than maybe the exhibition copies that are viewed online. That the collector has the right to display the work. Following the artist's intent, they have the right to display that work publicly and privately. That the collector can be assured that the work is authentic through the provenance, through the blockchain. That the collector has the right to loan or lease the work, and that you can also grant that temporarily to other parties. The collector also has the right to resell or transfer the work. That the collector may remain anonymous. This is sort of, I believe, a fundamental internet right. The sales are recorded publicly, but they can be made under an alias. And importantly, that the collector respects the artist's rights. And FairFile really foregrounds that. And then lastly, like with the artist right, the collector retains those rights in perpetuity. Okay, so like winding my way towards a conclusion, one thing is that NFTs are new-ish in this space, but people have been trying a lot of things over the years. And the way that I think about it is people have been trying different ways of supporting artists to make work. And so these are a few things that I feel have not worked at scale over the last 2 decades. One is art software on CD-ROMs. I've tried this twice, once with the Bitfarms Gallery in New York and once with the Dam Gallery in Berlin, to release editions of software on CD-ROMs. This was around 2005, and neither of those initiatives really ever launched. It seemed like it might be viable at the time. Another is grants and commissions for online digital art. Like when the web, unfolded, became more public in the 1990s, there were a number of organizations that began to make commissions and grants to support artwork, and it worked well. A lot of artists were able to make interesting, engaging work through that support, but I would argue that it was too far in between. It supported a few artists with one project, but it didn't really support many artists' careers over time. Another thing which is a lot more recent are these different companies who are making hardware and then selling subscription models with that. I've seen a number of these. I've engaged with a number of these kinds of companies over the years, and they have a ramp up and they sort of ramp down. It's really hard to make hardware. It's hard to make hardware sort of at a cost that feels affordable or accessible to collectors. And I think a lot of them have ended up taking venture capital money. And in my opinion, that sort of caused them to burn through money really quickly, not in a sustainable or collaborative way. And they sort of crashed and burned. Another thing that I feel has worked for some artists, but hasn't really worked at scale, are subscription models, things like Patreon. And I think they worked for some artists working in different media, but that's sort of my point of view on all of this, is that we need different opportunities, different options to work for artists who work in different ways. And so the subscription online platforms haven't worked, at a large scale. And then lastly are online video distribution markets. I think some of them are too restrictive. They have previews only, they have watermarks, you can't download the files. And I think others have prices that, in my opinion, are just not accessible enough to really work at a scale, like as in the way that NFTs are working at scale, where there's a wide range of accessibility. Of course, there are, so many problems with NFTs and in the NFT space. So to name just a few of them that I feel are maybe the most essential, one is climate change. NFTs that work on what are called proof of stake chains don't have this issue, but the most vibrant markets in the NFT space are really Ethereum based, which uses a tremendous amount of power to secure the blockchain. That is very much a problem. Another is a lack of diversity. The art world has been working for a really long time to sort of move collecting away from like a focus on white male artists. And I feel like that has worked, it's happening, but in the NFT space, we've reverted back. I feel like we've gone back and sort of lost that perspective. Another is that usually NFTs are collected in marketplaces, not galleries. I think marketplaces are crassly commercial. They're really only about the money, and they don't provide, as galleries do, a context for the work or curation. I think we need more galleries to balance what's going on with the marketplaces. I think another elephant in the room is the flipping culture. This idea that the work really is just a financial instrument rather than, as we traditionally think of art. And then last, the transparency in the data from sales, I think, can be really difficult. On one hand, it's wonderful for that to be public, but it can provide a huge stress for the artists for that to be public if things don't sell or sell in the way that they had hoped they would. Oops. All right. So from the perspective of digital art, it's been emerging for over 60 years. NFTs have really created, in my opinion, the first substantial markets for digital work, for generative art, despite all these things that people have been trying for decades. It's a significant change. I think we should talk about it at length. Here are just a few things that have happened recently that have caught my attention. One is the Pace Gallery basically bought artwork from Leo off of the secondary market and then sold that at Frieze LA a few months ago. Another is this auction that just wrapped up a couple of days ago at Sotheby's. I mean, Christie's, Phillips, and Sotheby's have all been having high-profile galleries. I think one thing interesting about this particular one was the way that it combined pioneers like Charles Surrey and Vera Molnar with artists who have really emerged through the NFT marketplace. And the fact that Vera Molnar, an artist who, I believe she's 98 now, has been making work for decades, had her highest sale ever through this NFT sale that just wrapped up a few days ago, I think is of note. And then Art Blocks is a platform and gallery for selling generative artwork. In the last year, I think more income has been generated for artists and for collectors of generative art than I ever really thought or imagined was possible in all the years that I've been doing this. So I think that's a good spot to end. I'll end right there. Thanks very much for the opportunity to present and to express these ideas.
Thanks, Casey. That was a great presentation. I just want to say a little anecdote before I ask my first question, which was that I think a couple of years ago, you and I were in a car in LA, and you were telling me that you were feeling that the gallery system wasn't working for you and you needed to find something better. And when I saw Feral File, I was pretty blown away because I think you might have been working on this pre-NFT boom, but when it came out, it just kind of synced up with all the other stuff that was happening. And Feral File, for those of you who don't know it, is probably the only NFT sales platform that I know of that takes an approach that is based on the ideas of curation, of exhibition, of creating context around the works. And to see that sort of compete with the super rares and the OpenSeas and all the other sort of marketplaces was really refreshing. And I had the the great sort of privilege of buying John Raffman on Feral File, which was really exciting for me because he was a very embattled artist at that time. He was kind of suffering from cancel culture, and having see him part of this show and being able to buy one of his pieces felt like a very a great gesture, and I'm really happy to have been able to do that. So. You know, I just want to sort of ask a question across the room based on all of your experiences, and I'll start to my right, is that, you know, the question around this panel is, are NFTs here to stay? And if you were to take from your own individual positions as gallerist, advisor, collector, and Casey, multifaceted marketplace, teacher, artist, what are the things that would make you say today that you want to throw your weight behind NFTs? And what is it that makes you think that this is here for a while and it's not just a bubble that's going to burst? So, whichever order you want to go.
Okay. Well, I think it's like asking if the sun will come up in the morning. I mean, of course it will come up in the morning. The only thing is that sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it's cloudy, sometimes you're blown away, sometimes it's rainy, but it will stay here forever, I think, NFTs. I mean, it's something that is, especially for generative art, for example, it's made for generative art, especially if you make generative art, like, for example, on R blocks, in the contract itself, or on a FX hash, for example, with the aid of a file. These are all, let's say, platforms that enable the artist, especially the generative artists, to sell their art in a very direct way, in a 24/7 way, which is not always easy for a collector, because Casey has sometimes the habit of dropping, not in Europe hours, but in LA hours, let's say. And so I maybe collected one item of the 4 or 5 sometimes. But I think, yes, it's a point of sale that is inevitable for people or artists that are selling electronic art. Yeah.
I think also you're talking about the sun rising. I will say it was exactly the same question when internet came out. You know, everyone was saying, what is this thing? I mean, it's going to take our place. It's not going to be there forever. So who is able to live without internet, actually? I mean, it's not possible. So I think really the NFT system, which is more like linked, of course, to blockchain and to cryptos, is already in our life anyway, even if we don't know, even if we don't realize it. I mean, I was reading that 38% of different marketplace or platforms will increase the possibility to buy in crypto in 1 year. So you can imagine if you don't have any crypto, I mean, you would be out in 10 years of the market for any kind of purchase, even if you buy like a crispy thing, or if you buy art, or if you will be able to buy everything, because it's a new way of thinking to purchase any kind of thing. But for the moment, we are very early in that time, so it will take time. But for sure, it's exactly the same than internet. So the question is even not a question.
Yeah, it's definitely part of something much bigger than just NFTs and art. So I think it's here to stay, and it's part of a much bigger evolution. So yeah, of course.
And I think it's also even more. It's more. It's an evolution of the way we think about how we live. So it means that we are more in a virtual world. So we're not of course, we're not talking about metaverse or whatever, but it's linked somehow. So I think we're gonna be able to live a real, concrete life, but we will be also able to live in a virtual kind of life. So everything would be virtual. And we have to live with virtual art, virtual places, virtual houses, virtual friends. So, and we are already in virtual friendship, right? With Instagram and everything. Who is able to say, well, all my followers are my super friend? I mean, you don't know most of them, but you have a link with them, which is a virtual link. So I think it's also a way to live differently in a virtual way, but it doesn't mean that it's not a good way to live. It's just very different. And we have to learn how to live with it with all the different tools. So crypto would be one of them, blockchain would be one of them, and then we will use all of that to live with art, with friendship, with relation, with everything. I think so.
Casey, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. Yeah, I agree with, as I think all the three panelists said, first and foremost, yeah, it's here to stay. I think it's here to stay for sure. In what capacity, how it goes up and down over the years, no clue. It's incredibly volatile. Will Ethereum move to proof of stake? Will Tezos survive? All these kinds of questions. It's fortune telling. Don't know, but I think something has shifted. I think there's so many people who are engaged with it and believe in it that I think it's going to be a part of the way that art moves forward from here on.
Yeah, I think from my experience, there's a huge actually gap between the sort of preaching to the choir, which we all sitting here and yourself in LA, we're kind of sold on it already in a sense because we've kind of seen the other side of the curtain. But I was going around all the galleries at Art Brussels that are presenting NFTs, and one of the things that struck me is that almost every practice from every artist is different. Some of them are trying to bridge the physical and the digital. Some of them are trying to do these pure generative pieces. Some of them are doing things because they have no other way of creating arts and they're stuck somewhere where it's impossible to do anything else. And so it almost seems like there's a very, and I was talking about this with some of the people I was going around the fair with, is like, there's no real pattern here. It's like sort of all over the place. And so I think, we also have this booth at the art fair where we're receiving people who are coming and asking us questions, and like we're seeing the type of questions that people coming to an art fair are asking, and also it's all over the board. So one next question for you guys is like, what do you think is the way that a larger crowd, may it be art world people or people from who are interested in collecting and interested in arts, but maybe don't have high roller collector buying power. How do we get more of those people in the space without relying on Bored Apes and PFPs and collectibles, but in a meaningful way that actually brings them into sort of the values of NFTs? Is that a hard question?
So if I resume, your question is how to get clients and to get people interested in this kind of new art.
Yeah, not just clients. I mean, essentially, I think one of the things that you hear a lot in crypto projects is people are trying to build communities, right?
Yeah.
So how do you make bigger communities and engage people more? Maybe they don't buy the art, but they follow you, they're interested in what you're doing. They take an interest in the space.
Yeah, yeah. It's true that something that I really enjoy in NFT is the fact that it works with community. And I think it brings back to different kind of sharing space and sharing ideas and sharing experiences. So how to build this, I think it's the time you share, I think it's your passion. I mean, people will talk. It's always I think it's really sharing things. And this is one of the super positive point in this kind of work, artwork, or new technology thing. It's the way that we can exchange. And when you were talking with Kaze, that he's over there and we here, and we could have someone in Hong Kong or whatever. I mean, the way that we can share things is the way that we can build together something different. And Kaze was saying something that I think is really super important. And I'm a gallerist, and I have to say that most of the artists are living, it's difficult to live from your art. Yeah. It's really difficult. And I think the second market where the artist will get some money from that point, I think this is, for me, a revolution. And it's really there to be, I mean, to help all the artists. And this is really one of the most important points, I think, in NFT. Part of all this new mentality or new thoughts or new philosophical way to buy art. I think this is something very important, because we used to have like the, the producer in the 90s or even beginning of 20s. You had this kind of man who had a lot of money and buy all the production of one artist and will make him work. But we don't have that so much today. So this is maybe the new way to help the artists to create and to continue to create. So I didn't answer to your question, but anyway.
Yeah, and I also think everything that's going on in the NFT scene triggers more traditional artists to come up with new kind of ideas, but they need help with production from a developer or something to create it. So it gives them a larger network when they create something in caliber and when they work together with a developer, for instance. And I also think last year I did a project with a sculpture artist, and he makes his sketches on an iPad and makes little models of it. But before NFTs, he didn't do anything with it because it was something digital in his mind. He couldn't do anything with it. But now we made like an edition of it, like an art business gift from a CEO that want to give something to his employees. So that's another way of blending more worlds, like the art world with that was a tech company, and so it's like a good way to distribute your work in other communities, so you can make it bigger and you can inspire other people that otherwise don't go to a museum or a gallery and get them into touch with something cool, piece of art.
And I think the best thing is I'm, for example, in a Twitter group with about, there is a maximum of 75, so let's say 80% are artists. And so what they do is they try to onboard other artists, and collectors try to onboard other collectors. And so that way you can enlarge, let's say, your community base. You can also do collaborations. What I see a lot is in the Twitter group I am in, is that a lot of collaborations between different artists are set up. So you have like an oil painter that makes the oil painting, but then does a digital scan, and then you have a music artist or a poet that makes a story with that let's say electronic artifact. So you have a lot of possibilities. Let's say for onboarding, when I started collecting, it was in March 2021. And that was also the, let's say, the start of the Hikotnung platform. And there you saw that this platform came more or less out of necessity, especially for artists, let's say in Latin America, Brazil, where you had, where COVID was struck the people very, very hard, and they couldn't get out of their homes. And so the only way, let's say, to sell their art was via a digital electronic way, using the internet. And by means of the blockchain, let's say, creating that platform was, let's say, for them, a very easy way to reach a lot of collectors in one time. They didn't even have to buy the currency. They received from, they had like a Tezos fountain where you could apply, and then you get like 2 Tezos to start, to get you started. So there you see that they started from a necessity and use that tool to help them and enable them to have a better life. And you see most of the time in life when you use something out of necessity, it's, let's say, it's a stay. It's something you see that, okay, I can use this as a utility to sell my art. So it's that way moving forward. It's not something, you know, we invented and we try to sell to somebody, but nobody wants it or few wants it. There it was really out of a necessity. And so you see that the interaction there was really big.
But even before the COVID, I mean, it was full of different groups that helps each other. I mean, it was really very strong. Yeah. I mean, the artists between themselves, and even with some producer, or, you know, really people just get together, sharing, helping. It's like a community, a real community, in the sense of wild word, of course, but it was even before the COVID, I think. I mean, I felt that, especially in Twitter. That's true.
Casey, do you want to add anything to that?
I just wanted to say I'm very excited about people experimenting, trying new things, exploring at this moment in time. Yeah, Frederick just talked about Hikotnunk. That came out of nowhere. It appeared. It was like lightning in a bottle. It was energizing. It was a catalyst. It was something completely new. FX Hash was kind of similar. It had so much energy right now. And when it was launched, it was just a complete experiment. Somebody with a good idea, with the belief that an idea could work, building it, testing it, people recognizing it for what it was, and energy flows from there. Like, I'm hoping over the next year or two, we see dozens of other experiments happening, and we imagine new things, and we'll be surprised. Like, my hope is that we'll be really surprised at how things evolve and how things develop. One thing maybe quickly to say, which for me is a bit of a cautionary tale, but also has potential, is that in the early 2000s, there was a tremendous energy among generative artists, people working with early days of processing, working with Flash, releasing work over the network, sharing it with everybody, sharing the source code. That was a moment of great energy, great production, great collaboration. And it was done completely without any collecting, any financial incentive. It was just done out of interest and engagement and out of heart. And that eventually kind of fell apart as over time. And that energy I had never experienced until last year with the Hikotnunk community. And a lot of the people who had been engaged before sort of came back and were producing work there. And it really felt like it was a community of artists who were collecting each other's work and supporting each other's work. And it was truly international. And as I said, it was unexpected. It came, and it was a beautiful thing. I'm hoping for more of that to happen.
So quickly, for those of you who don't know, Hikotnunk is a platform that was created sort of, I don't know if it was directly in response, but there was a lot of criticism of the Ethereum marketplaces, and sort of there was a moment when artists were being heavily criticized for even minting on Ethereum. And so Hic et Nunc was a Tezos-based marketplace. So all the transactions were much cheaper. They were based on a different blockchain that made it. It was very difficult to criticize anybody for minting on Tezos. So it became a sort of a hub, as Frederick said, for artists who were coming from very underprivileged environments, but then also for artists who were maybe experimenting with Ethereum. They were like, we don't want to be part of this anymore. And they sort of jumped onto this much fresher, more dynamic environment that was built on the Tezos blockchain. I'm just going to quickly ask one more question before I open it up to the audience. And this is a question that's come up many times. I actually was talking to a student today at the fair, and I always like to sort of think of people who are in a position where they've evolved in their career to sort of look back and say, how can I give advice to people who are starting? And the first question I think that a lot of artists are asking today is that the tools, the marketplaces exist. If I am a talent and I'm creating work that I think is worth selling, I can find 100 places today to sell it. The one thing that I don't have is a way to make people aware that my work exists and that it's worth buying, because as we know, anybody who's been on any of the marketplaces knows that it's an endless stream of stuff. And some of it is good, some of it is terrible, but there's absolutely no way for you to sort of, place yourself at the top. So what would be a piece of advice that you guys could give to starting artists to make their presence known, to make themselves aware to collectors? Obviously, we know that there are tools, Web2 tools like Instagram and social media, but what would be your recommendation for people who are just starting out?
It's very simple. They need Twitter. I mean, they can really close off their Instagram account, and it's true. I mean, in the, let's say, from the 75 in my Twitter group, there are 70 artists, and they say, I did not sell any NFT through Facebook or to Instagram. Even they lose followers, let's say, if they post something on Instagram that is related to NFTs. So some really had to open a new Twitter account. So you need Twitter, and if you are, let's say, onboarded by another artist that is already a little bit known in the space, in the Twitter space, or you are onboarded by a collector that is already, let's say, that already has a name, it's much easier to get, let's say, to get a foot through the door, and to, let's say, to start or help your career. This is but Twitter is number one. And then sometimes also Discord helps, but start with Twitter.
And especially when you know that Twitter just has been bought by Elon Musk, no?
Yes, but I mean, I don't think that's.
I mean, if you buy something, you could maybe think that it would work somehow.
Yeah.
I think it's something that would go further and further. So that's why.
Yes.
No, I'm joking, but.
Yeah, I think Twitter and Discord are definitely the two main channels to use, but I receive also a lot of feedback of artists who hate to use Twitter and all those channels, and it took a long time to accept Instagram, and now they have to change again. So, and that's not because I'm working for a gallery, but I think that's an important role for the galleries. And that's in that way they're also gonna stay in this new ecosystem, is to help the artist to get it to the right people, actually a little bit in a traditional way, but with the digital layer above it. So I think.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. I mean, Twitter. I'm always going to Twitter, of course, like everyone. I mean, if you like NFT or art anyway, you go to Twitter. and check what's happening there. But I think you have really two different kind of markets and two different kind of way to show your work and to try to get your work out of the market. And of course, all the social part is Twitter, most of it. But then if you want to have something a little bit more specified and a bit more curated, like you said, I mean, you can go to different kind of galleries or even marketplace, like the one of Cazares, for example. I mean, it's curated. You have like something is really focused on some theme or some pieces or some whatever. I mean, Paul Wilder, who was here, also create different kind of exhibitions. So you can go for this kind of galleries or curators or marketplace, which are very specified. And I think this is also the role of the galleries to inform. It's also an education, and we have some clients, like classical clients, who are very interested. So we just open the door to a new market, to new kind of clients, to new kind of work, artwork, and artists. So everything is great to knock on the door. Twitter, galleries, curators, and everything.
Yeah, and I think that's also the exciting part for galleries is the NFT space that came really quickly. It's also like a little bit of an eye opener to make changes in a traditional world that is going for a long time like it's going. So I think the main focus has to be to support artists as a gallery. So if the world changes, the gallery has to look to the changes and do the right thing to support the artists. I think
That's our role.
Oh yes, like for example in the Twitter group, so artists also post them then in the Twitter group, and they say, could you please repost it, or you know, so that it's get noticed by some other, and so these artists, let's say, help each other also to get acquainted and to let's say reach new audiences. What also can help, especially then, I like for generative artists, is to read about their body of work, let's say, articles. So sometimes when they release a new piece, they write a very descriptive article about their work, how it's built up, what are the possibilities, what are the outcomes, what were the misses, let's say. And so for me, this is also let's say added value when you buy some work, or when you, let's say, get involved in collecting an artist to let's say read some articles about that the artist or the gallery has written. Because indeed some artists, let's say, have a gallery because they don't like, let's say, to communicate. I mean, and so that's the position then of the gallery. And so some artists can do that for themselves on Twitter, and we have some artists in the group, for example, that have both. So that have a gallery and that do their own drops on NFTs. And so they only need to agree then with the gallery what is decided on the commission, for example.
I like the way that the transparency of the way we work with artists is something very clear. And even for collectors or buyers who just want to have things very clear. And it's true that I have some artists who are working at the gallery since more than 10 years and doing digital artwork, but they are also selling NFTs with the gallery and without the gallery. At the end of it, it's how to help the artist and the creativity of the artist to be known, to be shown, to be appreciated by the people in general, clients or just visitors. So this is our job.
Before I pass it to the audience, Casey, do you want to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, just really quickly. I think for artists, it's really important to find community. I think artists understand each other in a way that nobody else can understand, and can take care of each other and help each other in the way that nobody else can really understand. And I think finding like a community that feels right to you rather than an imagined community that you think you want to join, like really building up true relationships with people. I think it's also really essential to be patient. And I think the most difficult thing is I believe that the validation for the work needs to be internal. It can't be based on the market or sort of the commercial success of the work. And I think that's the most difficult, or one of the most difficult things to do as an artist, is to believe in yourself deeply and be patient and to make the work that you feel is important for you to be making, regardless of what's happening with sales, crypto or not. But crypto accelerates it, makes it more difficult.
Great point. So yeah, does anybody want to ask anything? I see some hands.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm a gallerist and a founder. I have a startup that is working on a solution how digital art can change hands from artist to collector, that is respecting both like art historical traditional ways of authenticity, how to take care of a work, not in the next few years, but maybe in the next 100 years. And so I wanted to ask Casey directly, when it comes to software, what would be your ideal way of handing over a work of yours?
So, well, the traditional way that I did it before NFTs was a documentation package that would include the files on the media of the day. It would include the source code. It would include documentation prints that would show how the work looked when originally created. I think the truth is that eventually technology moves really quickly. The work will need, something will need to change with the work to keep it going. And so for me, the source code is the most essential thing. And having the documentation images allow either myself, if I'm still around, or someone in the future to sort of port the source code to a new environment and have it still look and feel like the original. I think some artists believe in emulation and sort of keeping it within the technology of the moment in which it was created. And then others like myself really feel that the work transcends any technical configuration or hardware platform, and that should really kind of keep moving as things change. And so with the blockchain and with NFTs, my preferred method is really to have like a zip package of documentation that covers all that material. And I don't think the work is really the code, but I think the work is, I guess, encoded in the code. So the source code is really the most essential thing for me. And so if that code is on chain, or that code is on IPFS, I feel that that's the most important thing for conservation over time for me.
Oui, bonjour, c'est une question pour madame. Sorry, in English. Gallerist, I was wondering, how do you choose your artists, your NFT artists? Because you said that you have digital artists in your own gallery. So when you choose an NFT artist to guarantee the quotation lasting in the times and so on, do you preferably choose an artist who already has a background in a net art, and then you're gonna buy the NFTs or show? How do you buy, the NFTs for your galleries? Do you have specific platforms, or how do you deal with that? With the history, like they say, like history of the artist and so on. And like Joanne, who was there, who has a very big background. Would you prefer her or an NFT artist?
The selection of the artist is always a very difficult thing to do, I have to say. First of all, there's a few things. For myself, I talk for myself because I think it's different for everyone. But I need to have a real nice and deep experience with the artwork of the artist. This is I mean, personal. So this is the first thing. I cannot sell something that I don't understand or I have no emotion with. So maybe that's not a good thing, I don't know, but this is my way. And second, I don't really look to the past or the historical part of the artist. I mean, I opened my gallery 12 years ago with digital artists, so you can imagine 12 years ago, even digital art would be like, what is it? That was the question. So I don't care about the historical part. I mean, what I care about is what the artist is really, what is his position in art, in contemporary art, where he wants to go. I think that the future of his thought is more important for me than what was his past. Because I'm here to build. I'm not the future, not to look over to the past. So I think this is the second thing. And the third thing is you have to, I think, to have the same, you have to understand each other, I think. Because it's a long way. It's not easy. It's a passion. It's not easy. You have to build something. And most of the time when the artists are not really well known or it's just the beginning, they are expecting many things. And they can be disappointed because it's not happening as soon and as quick as they would like. And of course, I'm impatient also. But you know, you always have to work on time. I think art is the question of time and passion. So if you have those two things with the good and right thought or way, I think you could make something very important. So this is the way I choose my artist.
Okay, my question is for Casey, and it regards the artist and collector rights. So I was wondering, in case of violation of rights of any part, which juridical jurisdiction treats the case? For example, you have an artist in LA and then you have a collector in North Korea. And so what's like the juridical frame in those cases? And if you think that in the future there will be like an artificial intelligence, like a juridical instance that will solve these net-based issues.
Thanks for the question. It's a pretty extreme example using North Korea as the example. It's really a better question for my colleagues who are more legally minded than myself. I believe that with a contract like that, what's most important is clarity, so that the people who are collecting the work understand the terms that the artists are laying out for them. Whether that becomes litigated or not is a whole separate question. And one thing about the rights is that you see them before you make the transaction, so that they are there to read through, and so you're committing to them when you collect the work. The contracts are based on U.S. legal precedent, I guess, to answer that question. I won't be able to answer the more complicated part of it legally. I'm sorry.
So for those who are interested in these questions, we actually have a talk tomorrow specifically about the legal and financial implications of NFTs, because it is obviously a problem, which, as you asked, which jurisdiction does it fall under? How do you enforce any kind of rules that are set inside of a contract or in the metadata of a smart contract? These are all questions that I don't think there are clear answers to, at least from the lawyers I've spoken to. There are currently, as far as I know, as many answers as there are lawyers, so we're gonna have to figure it out. Any last questions before we wrap up? One, two,
I just wanted to add something that is maybe very boring because it's very analog, but this is how the NFT world could actually also inspire the analog art world. This secondary market effect of the artist being paid is something that could globally be enforced in the legal system in every country. For all physical art as well. The music industry did it since the beginning. I don't know why the art world is not appreciating its creators enough to enforce that, but it's a very analog problem that can also be solved very analog. Yeah, that's all.
That's something we are also working on to integrate that also for the physical art. And the registration part and the royalties, that we can do it for all kind of art. Yeah.
Like auctions that are happening in the UK, they do have that already enforced. So, yeah. So.
But
yeah,
you know, most of, I mean, even the museums and even, I mean, I'm thinking about different work, like digital artwork, to be registered in blockchain. So that would mean that they would have this kind of contract, because as I said, the 10% of fees, it's something revolutionary and it's necessary. So I think even galleries should do that for any kind of artwork.
I think regarding the royalties on for NFTs, you have a lot of different platforms with a lot of different abilities. Let's say for now on FX Hash, for example, a lot of generative art. There you can set, let's say the artist can set the royalties that he wants, but he can also give some royalties to the first collector, for example. And so if the first collector then resells, he receives also some part of the secondary, and then the artist receives some part. So there are a lot of possibilities. Let's say that we are still in watching TV, black and white, and so we are now in a let's say in a evolutionary manner going to plasma, OLED, whatever, 4K, 6K, but it does not mean that you don't have to buy a TV now. I mean, you can wait till the color TV is out, but then you would have to wait for 20 years or 30 years. So for people, I mean, if you want to really try it, you should buy, you know, get some Teslas and buy something. That's the way to, let's say, to really experience the collecting, or as an artist, try to set up a shop and
the best way to understand it is to just do it and not over analyzing it.
No. And also, I mean, if you're uncertain, you can look into the wallet. Let's say you can look what other collectors or other artists have bought and collected, and some, let's say, artists are very good collectors as well, and so there you can, let's say, get inspired and see some what they bought, and you can buy let's say the same, because let's say a lot of the NFTs are editions, so you have a lot 1-to-1, but you also have a lot of edition. So a 1-to-25, 1-to-10, 1-to-100, whatever. And so it doesn't mean that you need a lot of money. You can, with, let's say, $3, $6, you can already buy a few NFTs.
Well, on those wise words, I want to say thank you to all of you for being part of this and for sharing your insight. Thank you, Casey, for joining us from far away and for preparing your talk. I hope to see you soon, and I hope to see you guys all soon at Art Brussels or
Thank
elsewhere.
you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, Kaze. Bye.